Well, well, this is an absolute treat because I'm here with one of my coaching clients, Ed Cox, and it is Ed. It is such a joy to be with you on your journey, and it's I come off our calls actually so inspired um, because you amaze me. So I would like to shine a light, on some of the extraordinary things you're doing, and just also shine a light on your transformation. I think we've been working together. How long have we been working together?
It'll be a year in February.
Yeah, a
So,
year already. Good Lord.
yeah, I
Oh,
know.
that time has flown. Time has flown by.
Yes, it really has.
Yeah. So, Ed, do you want to share a little bit about your background, and then if you want to just share a little bit from your perspective, what our coaching relationship has felt like for you.
Yeah, before I share about my background in our coaching relationship, I just wanted to tell you how thankful I am for the deep impact that you, Susan, Zach, and Dill are making. And I was watching the videos and I saw you and Dill under the lion, and I wanted to share. This relates to my EO journey. Right when I joined EO, I decided I needed to take a trip. And so I went to Uganda and I got this great painting of a lion that you and Dill reminded me of when you spoke about the painting that you all have.
Wow.
And it was painted by a former student at Bob Goff's Restore International, which is just a tremendous place that is doing great things for a lot of Ugandan youth.
Wow.
And so we put the Santa hat is not always on the lion, but
That's right. It's the season.
is the season. So, anyways, I my story is I'm going to walk into my office because at any point, it's 10:30 my time right now. I
Hey,
know it's
hey,
8:30
Ed,
your
I'm,
time.
I'm just wondering, would you like to cross over to our regular Zoom? Would you like to do it on the computer? Would that be helpful for you?
Well, I may I'm going to prop this up and sit down, and I think that
Perfect.
will make
Perfect. Okay, I think that's
for
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm
Oh,
just
nice.
going to take a seat here,
Yeah.
and hopefully that'll be better. Is that good?
Yeah. Hey, well, I would like to just start out by you sharing first about yourself, just to provide kind of where we met and the work you do, and perhaps even, what inspired you to want to reach out for coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been a member of Entrepreneurs Organization for almost 5 years. And I got into EO because I was working with a life coach at the time Jane Gardner, who has a neuroscience based coaching practice. And so I really had gotten so much out of my work with Jane. And I jokingly say that she got sick of working with me and told me to look into EO so I could get other people to talk to. And so I did, and it's just had such a remarkable impact on my life. And um, so I grew up was born in New York, grew up in Texas. I lost my father at the age of 5, and my mom raised me and my two brothers by herself and never remarried. And I decided after in college that I was very interested in the law, went to law school, and have practiced now for over 25 years. And I have developed a practice that is uh, construction, real estate, and business litigation and transactions. But 8 years ago, I had something that kind of came out of the blue, and it was a letter from a very close friend of mine who had found himself in prison. And Mitch wrote me from prison and asked me if I would come visit him. And that experience led me to represent him and prepare a parole plan that had him released from prison into my employ. And it was just such a beautiful journey. He ended up we worked together for over 7 years, and he was just my very best friend and such a great asset and contributor to my firm. And, along the way, his daughter is my son's age, and I got to baptize both of them, which it was entirely unexpected and a real joy. And so fast forward, and I am serving as an officer in my Fort Worth EO chapter, and I'm going to the Eccentric Conference, and I hear you speak to the group on your book, Living Well Within, and the principles in that book. And I found you and Zach afterwards, and you all showed me how to give a heart-to-heart hug, and, and
Oh,
which I love and will always remember. And then so I got your book, and just the neuroscience piece really resonated so deeply with me, because I've had 4 strokes, and I have this vein malformation in my brainstem that luckily I haven't had to have anybody operate on, but I've gotten very close with my neurosurgeon, who I see once a year, and have gone through this journey. And so your neuroscience and medical background really resonated deeply with me. And I reached out because I felt that you could really contribute meaningfully to my growth. And so we started coaching in February, and it has just been an experience that has exceeded my every expectation. I've been constantly amazed at what has come up spontaneously in every conversation, and how you have mentored and guided me on this journey of staying in the flow of life and being fully present and living a life that is as loving and compassionate and contributing as I possibly can. And it's just been remarkable. And I think that people at my law firm, my family, our friends would all say that it has really impacted and bettered me as a person. And so I just want to thank you for that.
well, I thank you for your thanks. But you remember when we started coaching, I actually I said, what's more likely to be successful for you on your journey? My skill as a coach, or how you show up for yourself in this experience, how you invest in yourself in the experience. And and you said you got it right there. You said, well, I guess it's on me, right? Because I can hold a container, and I have had many years of coaching experience, so I will show up with my full presence and my full skill and my full practice. But within that container, the success in coaching really comes down to you. And so we spoke about the activation factor. So when I do an intake for fit, what I'm listening for is this somebody who's willing to take ownership and invest in themselves? Because I don't take every client that comes. I just want to know, there have to be criteria. Is this somebody who's willing to invest in themselves? And then are they willing to there's certain activation factors. The first thing is openness. Are they ready? And then there's this other piece, and this can be cultivated, which is, the ability to cultivate kindness for oneself and for others. So there's, this compassion piece, having a heart space. And then there's the insatiable curiosity. And then there's this quality of presence. In other words, are you showing up on time? Are you very locked in? Are you multitasking? No, and then the big piece is it's about purpose. It's about purpose. So, I've showed this slide, because I just want people to understand this is the framing, because I also appreciate that there might be other coaches out there and they might be fascinated to want to learn, like what are we doing in our sessions? So it's actually quite simple. Before when I used to do coaching, I'd have clients send me their bullet points. We'd do this big intake, this elaborate intake, and there would need to be a summary, and it's actually simplified over the years. And what we're doing, we're actually saying life is the curriculum. Life is the curriculum, right? That's why it's an emergent process. And really, it's so strange. I'm just even thinking about the channel that we're in. That's this channel that we're in, living well from within. That's what we've been doing. I didn't even put two and two together. So there's the book, Leading Well from Within. The evolution of that work is living well from within. And I've just connected. That's the journey we've been on. That's the journey I'm on now because of my cancer. I'm living into this. But that's what you even actually, when you said, it was interesting, you had like a Freudian slip. You actually said, well, living well from within, because you've been working this work right now we've been living well from within. That's
absolutely,
because you realize that life is the curriculum. And so what we do, and I've shared this with, in other videos. So this is how we start. So first of all, when we understand the active learning cycle, which involves experience. And by the way, you've got active learning cycles beneath I'm going to speak to Amanda today, wherever it serves you, that we can ignite your personal transformation. So I want you to kind of get a sense that, there's a fair amount of investment that we won't get into numbers, but Ed's investing quite a bit in our coaching relationship. I mean, financially, he's investing, making a financial commitment, both in terms of money and time. You're getting the benefit of my free coaching with you. So with all these active learning cycles, you're going to be going through a transformation, a personal transformation, much like actually the way I serve Ed. And this is the framework we use. So it's a very powerful framework that we start out with content and experience. And then it goes into, and we know that content experience is helpful, but that's not going to be enough to create meaningful change in anybody's life. So the next piece of this is a big piece of this is reflection. Reflection. And what I've just spoken about with the activation factors is the qualities of activation, the attitude of activation, openness, kindness, curiosity, presence. I'm going to come back to purpose in a moment. And then we've spoken about these questions in exchange. There's a certain kind of choreography of generative questions, like what matters most now and why? Where have I been? Where have I seen this ignited me in the past that reveals my current strengths? What's my vision for my future? What are the strategies and action steps I'm going to take to get there? So that's this part over here. And then it goes into action. So you take inspired action and then you come back and have new experiences. And this is the coaching journey, because it's essentially experience, reflection, action, experience, reflection, action, experience, reflection, action. So it's not a closed loop, it's a spiral. And that over the year has been your journey, right?
Absolutely.
We've gone through multiple spirals. But here's what's key. Each of these have expertise. So actually, when you look at the active learning cycle and you say, what is the most important skill? What is the most important skill in learning and growth? Well, I'd asked that of Zach, many months ago. And he said, well, Dad, it's learning how to learn. So this is the meta skill of learning how to learn. It's the most important thing. So we start out at the beginning of coaching, as this being the framework. And then we develop mastery in each of these areas. So where I go next is after serving the meta skill over here, then we go into what is the purpose for the coaching? What is our purpose? Like, why does this matter to you? In other words, what does success look like? And I work on 6-month blocks. what does success look like after these 6 months? And many clients, I've got one client, and I've been supporting him for 7 years. But I also want to just say, I have to say that as Ed will attest to, my philosophy of coaching is one of self-coaching. In other words, I'm not looking for Ed to develop a dependence on me. My style of coaching is holding a space in which Ed is naturally coming to his own genius rather than me revealing my genius. I hold a container for Ed running his active learning cycle where Ed, and you've been so glorious to work with because I wanted to pay credit to you. This extraordinary transformation you've had over the last year is a result of you being able to effectively run your active learning cycle, and particularly the way you invest in ownership, openness, kindness, curiosity, focus, and you're intensely on purpose. Would you share, we willing to share? I know, I'm also mindful that, oftentimes coaching relationships involve confidentiality, and I know we're now out here. So if you're comfortable, would you be willing to share, and it's absolutely okay to say no, but would you be willing to share when we started, what were your highest priority? What was your purpose for starting coaching?
So I have a deep desire to identify, accept, and fully put in use and action my gifts and talents, and do that in a way that loves deeply and fully and contributes to the betterment of others as best I can.
Beautiful. Okay. So, if you were to distill that in one word, a small phrase, how would you distill that into crystallizing that?
Love fully and deeply.
Beautiful. That's the essence of it, right? So when you come up with your purpose, and by the way, I want people to understand that, in coaching, it's okay to have goals, but if your goal is, let's say, weight loss in lifestyle, it means it'll be very targeted, and then the engagement will be self-limited, right? So what Ed's describing is a bold goal, a high altitude vision that is actually that high altitude, essentially, which is live a loving life, right? I'm just thinking about how that overlaps with what my deepest wish for my kids. That was my message to my kids. So the alignment there is just, boggles my mind. So, but that high altitude vision, and for some people, they may say, well, that's kind of airy fairy. How are we going to put any specificity around it? I want you to know that vision and purpose will restructure everything below it. And it actually drives, you'll see later on that this has driven very tangible results for Ed. But what this does, this purpose curates the content and experiences we focus on. It curates the content and experiences we focus on. So in the infinite, because ultimately when you look at this, oftentimes coaching has some people use a coaching curriculum, and truly the curriculum is not on the slide deck. The curriculum's on what's on deck. Life is the curriculum. That's important for all coaches to know. Life is the curriculum. And ultimately, we want to kind of see what is the curriculum that's emerging. And the curriculum that's emerging at the edge of growth is one of two areas. It's the curriculum that's emerging happens at either the edge of frustration or suffering, the edge of pain, or it emerges at the edge of aspiration. Either way, it's a brilliant curriculum. That's where we grow at those edges, right? So you have an aspiration. You have an aspiration to live a loving life, right? So it declares, how do we do that in terms of what is the curriculum? What is that, the life being the curriculum, but what do we need to curate in terms of content and experiences that is going to help you actually grow in that direction? And then oftentimes when we start our coaching calls, you will share things, and sometimes things are going well, and sometimes things either way, when things are going well, we put it into the active learning cycle. We've actually said, oh, Ed, let me celebrate with you. Why do you feel it's going so well? Do you remember we've done many of those calls?
Yes.
And then it's like you've paused and you said, wow, And then you've unpacked, you've spoken through why are things going so well. And then you're reflecting, where could I do more of that? Right. And then you go into a new experience. And the times where you've actually been up against the wall, frustrated. You know, we've spoken about the relationships that were very challenging at times, where you get into, you know, you get into a sticky place, and we put that into reflection. Put into that as a reflection, and your capacity to stand in that fire with openness, kindness, curiosity, insatiable curiosity, and using that moment to reconnect with your purpose, to live a loving life, coming back home and letting that purpose drive your courage has been glorious, because you've actually come up with things to say, and you're willing to say, because there's a temptation for all of us, and you're a lawyer, my God, you know how to prosecute your relationships.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Nobody in your relationship stands a chance, because you can prosecute those relationships. Yeah. So your ability to say, how do I step out of the way of myself? Step out of the way of my ego power and get more deeply into my humility in basically embodying my purpose, which is to live a loving life. So you actually, in what's amazing about you with your insatiable curiosity, you're willing to set your ego aside in service of something larger than yourself, your purpose,
right,
and God. You know, frankly, in service.
Yes.
And what that does for you, it's enabled you over the year that we've been working to elevate your consciousness to become an extraordinary conscious leader. I want to talk a little bit more about your journey of how you've become an extraordinary conscious leader. Okay, so shining a light on you further. So I'm going to come and talk to you. We're going to set up to talk about your podcast. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
So you're going into these active learning cycles repeatedly on every call. And then there's also this, I'm on call for you 24/7. You know, I'm trying to think if you've ever used those calls, because partly the reason why I'm on the call is we're on this arc of coaching, and it's a self-coaching model. And the beauty of it, when coaching is really successful, when I coach you to self-coach yourself, and actually in every touch point of coaching, it releases any dependency on coaching. So you're only in coaching, not because you have to be, but because you choose to be, right? Like I can say, Ed, you don't need to be in a coaching relationship with me right now. You really don't need to be. The only reason why you're doing is it's still feeding your soul, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
I just want to make you get that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then, when you're really successful is when you know how to self-coach yourself to the extent, because as an awakened conscious leader, to the extent that in knowing how to self-coach yourself, you now know how to coach others to self-coach themselves. That's when the magic begins. Because then as a fractal, we come back here as a fractal, you become the seed that is actually now, there's the sunflower. There's the sunflower. You becoming the seed that is enabling your learning. And by the way, your awakened conscious leadership you're a fractal in the world. So what you're doing, the work you're doing in the world is you're teaching others how to self-coach themselves, to teach others how to self-coach themselves. And so ultimately, in your presence, people are awakening their conscious leadership, not because of you from top down, but because of them from the top up. From the bottom up. Right?
Yes. Right.
It's just a beautiful thing. And that's how we actually, ultimately, when we do the work of awakening conscious leadership in the world, this is the work. Ed is awakening as a conscious leader in my presence. I'm actually awakening my conscious leadership myself through my active learning cycle with my brain cancer. So I'm becoming more awakened. I've gone into many cycles. That's why you're watching me thrive. I'm thriving because I'm running for my own life. I'm self-coaching myself as I'm actually coaching Ed to self-coach himself. So we're co-awakening, and it's glorious, we're ratcheting up. It's just so incredibly glorious. And it's interesting. Ed, let me ask you this. Would you say, since I was diagnosed with my brain cancer, because you were shocked by that when I told you the news.
Yes.
Would you say the value of my coaching to you has gone up
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just how you have shared this experience is so powerful, and is just a continuation of your sharing your own brilliance and living out this cycle.
Beautiful. Well, so we're living these cycles together. So it's like, and so, you know, I'm not a guru. I just want to be very clear with everybody. I'm not a guru. I am human like everybody else. And so I am going through this, living my own active learning cycles as I'm actually inviting everybody else into your active learning cycles. And so please just know, when I'm actually sharing with you, a lot of this is coming from the grace of God. Please know that I want you to have direct access to your genius. So as you go through your active learning cycles and you look below, because what I want to do is, I want to do you listening. I want you to know that I'm giving you coaching through the channel, and it's free. It's free.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is just click on the free videos, and as you reflect with an active learning cycle, and Amanda Rooker is going to actually do just like a beautiful, we'll probably do a version of, there'll be an encapsulation of what is the summary of the experience, and you'll have some reflective questions and considerations for action in the videos that lend themselves well to that. And then there might be links to other people's resources, because I want to shine a light on people. And Ed, whatever, I would like you to put, send me your information about your podcast, and details about who you are, because I want to shine a light on you. So there's also that dimension.
Thanks.
So we've been running these active learning cycles, and then the part of the coaching as well. There is purpose. It curates the content experience. We're developing expertise around, improving the quality of reflection. And then there's this part with action. There's a certain self-accountability for action. And that's certainly a part of coaching that actually can be very helpful, because part of it is facilitating Ed's self-accountability for following through on his actions. But I want you to check this other thing out. We don't do very well with that. We do very well with action in general. And content experience is an action step. Certainly action, that's do. Action is an action step. This is more like be. So you need to build into your time. You need to build into your time for reflection. So, and the reason why it's important is the hour that Ed and I have for coaching every 2 weeks. The hour that I have with Ed for coaching every 2 weeks. We have structured in the time for Ed to actually, this is his time for reflection. This is the being time. So this is where we metabolize the experiences and come up with new actions. Ed, because of his investment in coaching, he's structured. He's got a structure and a rhythm. And he's also built a structure and a rhythm because of EO. I spoke to George Gann at this amazing, I don't know if you've seen this incredible.
Oh, wow. I saw that you had. I haven't watched it, but it just makes me smile seeing George on camera.
Okay, well, can you just give George a plug? Because I want everybody to understand, the stature that he has in the EO community. And then I want to kind of mention one other thing about George.
Well, there are many tremendous people in EO, but at the pinnacle of EO, I would say, in terms of the vision and direction and the way that the organization feeds and nourishes its members, is George Gann. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough a year ago to attend a regional leadership academy that George and Warren Rustin led.
I want you to mention them both, because George, I would say that the combination of George and Warren, I think, when George is the chief idea architect, but I would say that George and Warren together, it is the nourishing heart and soul of the organization that spreads out across the 14,000 members. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And they are such incredible people, and could be choosing to do any number of things, and they are giving of themselves to this organization in the belief that by mentoring and encouraging members to learn and grow through their mentorship and leadership, that we in turn will pass that on to our own companies and communities, and ultimately that the world will be a better place for it. And so George and Warren are very different people, but are both incredible people, and I value them equally. George has a quiet peace about him, and speaks so consistently lovingly that it's just really just remarkable, and he is a joy to be around. And Warren um, is I'll never forget when he stood up and began speaking. It was like, I don't know what it was, but I was immediately at attention and just absorbing and trying to get every single word that was coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Because in both of them, you get an immediate sense of their character and integrity and innate goodness that is evident in their actions. And that, to me, is what this learning cycle is about, is reflecting on our actions. And they are in action in such an unbelievably positive way that it is just awesome and inspiring.
Okay. All I can say is amen, brother. That was preaching at, that was just really amen. So I just, what you've said is just beautiful. And on the video with George, what George was sharing was actually, he was paying tribute to Warren, because Warren came up with a 10-10-10 ritual, right? Do you do the
Absolutely.
10-10-10 ritual?
I do, yes.
Okay, so can you share from your perspective? Because literally what the 10-10 ritual is, it's a ritual that EO members, many EO members, build into their day, a daily practice of reflection, right? It's a daily,
Yeah.
and it's how you start your day in the space. So you go from before you start the day in this place. It's a place of being. You're starting a place of reflection, and that was Warren's contribution to EO. So that's how EO members, many of them, like, I don't know what percentage, but I'm imagining it's a large percentage of EO members practice this 10-10-10 ritual. And I just want to imagine what it might be like for you to practice the same ritual, building in that ritual of appreciation, or this ritual. And imagine if the entire world did this. So can you share your experience of the ritual?
Well, first of all, Warren encourages everybody when they get up in the morning, very first thing, before you even get up out of bed, to put your feet on the ground and to express your gratitude and thanks for the day of life that you have before you. And that's in an instant. And so that is the initial mindset that he encourages everyone to start every day with. And then
I just want to pause
10.
I just want to pause before you go into the next 10 minutes, because that first move is crucial, right? Because it primes a context for the rest of the ritual. And so I want you to imagine you're swinging your feet, you're sitting up on the side of the bed, and you actually are entering the heart of gratitude. And then there's another piece where, I believe what George expressed yesterday was, there's a piece of this from that place of gratitude. You begin to think about, I want you to see how cool this is. You begin to think about, what is the purpose of my day? What is the purpose for my day? So you're actually priming your day for your active learning cycle.
Right.
That's the first move, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so once I get up, I go upstairs in the room I'm in right now, and I meditate for 10 minutes. And has been an extraordinarily powerful experience for me that I started after I had my first stroke, and it really helped ground my mind and settle my mind, as at one point I was dealing with the loss of use of my left arm and left leg for a time. And so meditation has tremendous value even for 10 minutes. And it really calms and centers our mind and allows us to be fully present in the moment. And then what they gave us at go ahead.
I just want to kind of like pause on that block and just clarify. So there's a meditation,
Yes.
and you meditate on, the different ways of meditating. One of the meditations is meditating on what you're grateful for, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
that's part of the meditation. So you could be meditating on your breath, but also you can be meditating on gratitude. So counting
Yes.
the blessings in those. What form of meditation do you do in those 10 minutes that you find most helpful?
I use an app. I use Sam Harris's Waking Up app. And so it's a guided educational process where Sam Harris has really taught me a lot about how to be more effective in my meditation practice. And I also take time from time to time and do express appreciation. And I have affirmations and a psalm that I recite, and just things that really ground me in the reality of how great life is.
Now, is this a psalm that you go back to? Do you do different psalms, or is there a particular psalm that you kind of come back to over and over again?
Well, I recite Psalm 23 every day.
Are you able? Would you be able to?
Absolutely, yeah. I hope I'm able. I mean, it would be awful if I couldn't. But the Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Amen.
Amen. So I want to just thank you for that psalm, because that just is awakening. That psalm is literally kind of like an anthem for my journey. I just wanted to thank you for actually touching me deeply with that. Ed. It's just extraordinary. So you come back to that. You come back to that psalm. So that invokes like almost, when you talk about the depth of servant leadership, the depth of servant leadership is not only being service of other people, but it's being in service of God, in however you express that. And that psalm, whether you call that God, whether you call that the field, whether you call it the force field of miracles, or the mystery, or the collective consciousness, whatever, Indira's net, whatever, that's servant leadership. It's being in service of that wisdom that's larger than ourselves. It's being willing to actually kind of serve from that place in your life. So what an
Yes.
extraordinary 10 minutes to do, to actually prime yourself for service. It's just, it's so inspiring. What do you do? So I want you, so far, in summary, first minute is you're sitting up at the side of the bed, igniting that feeling of gratitude, asking what's the purpose for your day. Now your next 10
Yes.
block is a meditation with this,
Yes.
with this rich connecting. Okay. So
Yes.
what's your next 10-minute block?
It is reading from, so at the Regional Leadership Academy, and I've got them right here, they gave us two books. The book, one book that I received is Epictetus's Manual for Living. And the other book is the Daily Book of Positive Quotations. And so, if I turn, I am on today, and just these are such.
Can you just flip to a random page? Because I have a sense that you flipping to a random page will bless us with something else, with just,
Yeah. This is December 12th. And it says, "The sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which can be the basis for understanding much of what is not shared between them and lessens the threat of their difference. And it ends by saying the more opportunities I have to do enjoyable things with others, especially people I may not know well, the better I can understand those who are different from me.
Wow. Okay. So I just want to say what a synchronicity. On December 12th, Ed has just shared when I was in my hospital bed asking the question, what matters most now? And then I came up with the revelation, make every moment count. The first lesson that arrived was to live intensely loving relationships, and to live intensely loving relationships in a cycle of receiving and giving love. And that happens to be the page that Ed falls on. So this is another one where we're in the force field of miracles. What is the likelihood that that's going to line up? And yet here it is. So
yeah,
it's
nil. And just on that experience, I took my son, Will, who's now 19, but I took him before his freshman year in college to San Francisco. And there was a Gideon Bible in the nightstand, and he pulled it out and he said, "Dad, you've read this like how many times?" And I told him 6 times in 3 different versions. And he said, "You know a lot of it." And I said, "Well, yeah, why don't you open it up just anywhere and let's see if I know anything about it." And it just so happened he opened the book to Psalm 23.
There we go.
And so I was able to blow his mind with the randomness of that coincidence and being able to recite that verbatim. And what a beautiful and impactful thing that was.
Okay. Well, clearly, just to be clear with everybody, clearly this is a script being written by God. We are just all following. We're in service of you, dear God, following your script, because you can't, if I might be profane for it, you can't make this shit up. You couldn't even script this. So we are giving it over to this mystery. We're in full spiritual surrender over here. Okay, so that's that 10-minute block. So that after the meditation, you read something inspiring. And by the way, I just want to show you can broaden out. We'll come back here to the active learning cycle. You may want to actually think about what is your purpose for the day? What is your purpose for the day? And curate your reading around that. Curate the content that you're reading. Match the purpose for your day. Pull something off your shelf that actually helps you curate that purpose. Make sense? And then you'll go into the reflection. And then see how this lines up for the most glorious third part of the 10-minute cycle. So what is the third 10 minutes?
It is journaling. And so I use an app called Day One, and it makes journaling really easy. But what George and Warren encourage us to ask ourselves every day is, why am I alive? And I couple that with what I got from Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. So I asked myself 2 questions, which is, why am I alive? And what good shall I do today?
Oh, okay. I just have this. This is incredible. Okay, so I want you to go back to this active learning cycle. So what this does, what this 10-10 does, and just in summary, what this 10-10 does is, again, foot over the bed. First 10 minutes is clarifying, you igniting into gratitude and clarifying your purpose for the day, right? And then the next 10 minutes is going into a meditation, and it's either meditating on gratitude or it's really priming and you using that psalm so you actually can feel what essentially you're doing with the psalm is you're inviting spirit into guiding. And then what you're doing in the reflection is you're listening deeply to spirit, what's flowing through, right? You're listening deeply to what's flowing through. With these questions, well, first of all, you've got a great attitude for reflection. hands down. You're primed for that. You're primed with openness because you're, as a servant leader now in service of spirit, you're open to the mystery. You're kind, you're compassionate, you're curious, you're adventuresome, you're present to this moment, and you're tethered to purpose. So you're driving through on that. And then what you're doing is, so you're in this incredible reflection, you prime that, and then you go into that third block. So again, first block was the meditation. Second block was the reading, which you're now curated based on your purpose. And the third block is the journaling piece, which is the reflection, right? So now you're actively reflecting. You're actively reflecting, and you're actively reflecting on, you're putting forward what matters most now, from why am I alive? What is my life? This is really the question, it's literally the first question that I asked myself when I got my cancer diagnosis. What matters most now? Make every moment count. It's the same thing, right? How can I live the purpose of my life today? And then you're invoking Benjamin Franklin, because you can say, what's the purpose of my day? But if you don't actually put that into action. So the fact that you put an action step in, can you repeat the question of Benjamin Franklin?
What good shall I do today?
There it is. So there's the action piece. And what you're going to do today, at the end of the day, you're probably going to reflect on what was my experience like? And you're back into the active learning cycle, right?
Yes. And I want to share part of my journal from November 3rd, because I see the journaling as beginning the action for the day and setting the tone and objective. And so what I wrote as an example, on Tuesday, November 3rd, I wrote, contribute constantly. Yeah. It is better to give than to receive. Acknowledge freedom is an inalienable right, and dwell deeply on the implications of this for the trajectory of my life. What does freedom mean when others in your community are just as free? Laws exist in part to constrain choices we have in our freedom to act in ways that damage or destroy others or things. We must respect others' freedom and temper our choices with the potential implications of ours. For me, fulfillment comes from an intentional job well done, a good deed done, the realization or recognition of the impact that one's choices have positively on the lives of others and society as a whole.
Okay, so this is like a perfect transition. So first of all, I want you all to listen to that, because essentially what you've just heard is an expression from Ed Cox, who is the embodiment now of awakened conscious leadership. Okay, I want you to understand the power of that. What Ed has just written there is the embodiment of conscious leadership, the embodiment of awakened conscious leadership. And so, Ed, I want you to actually share now. Can you now share about your podcast, how you're putting that, what you've just put in place, that awakened conscious leadership, so it's not just enough to have awakened conscious leadership. I want to make that clear. You can be awakened conscious leader. The real question is, what are you going to do with that awakening? What are you going to do with that awakening to make a meaningful difference in the world? So you're doing some extraordinary things with this awakened conscious leadership. Can you share now more about your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. My podcast is called Freedom Files. And I just recorded my second episode yesterday, and I'm very excited about it. And the podcast flowed out of our work together. And it relates to what I do. And I love being a lawyer because I get to contribute to people and businesses in areas that are really important and meaningful to them. And what I found is that working with prisoners who are seeking to be released early on parole is one of the most meaningful and impactful things that I can do. And so I started doing that with Mitch 8 years ago. And I've built that practice, and I now have a second lawyer at my firm who does that full time. And we've grown that practice substantially in our time working together this year. And I feel that there is a disconnect in society about people who have been to prison. Uh, these people are forever labeled as felons. And I believe that there is I have just seen and experienced time and time again a common and wonderful humanity and dignity in all of these people who are tremendously talented. They have love in their hearts, and there are so many people that I work with that virtually everybody I've worked with, I've been so impressed with. And so the podcast is a process of interviewing people who have served time in prison in hopes that people will get a better sense of the things that could happen in any of our lives that could entirely change our direction and trajectory and land any of us in prison. My first episode is an interview with a young man who was sentenced to 10 years for intoxication manslaughter. And I know a lot of people, including myself, who have had drinks and have driven a car. And that's just something that should not happen and does happen. And Taylor, unfortunately, fell asleep at the wheel and killed a mother and her son. And that was his first criminal act. And it was devastating for him and obviously the family who lost their loved ones. And so, talking to Taylor about what that has been like, both coping with the magnitude of the impact of that and how he is living his life since he's been freed in March of this year is just a tremendous story. And there is so much to learn from him and many others.
Well, what you're doing, I mean, essentially what you're describing is that when people are convicted as felons, they become marginalized in society. And what that does is it literally, the label convicted felon puts a shelter around, an armor around people's hearts. And it's easy to forget that these are people that really are just like us. And you said, by the grace of God, something has happened that has put them in this unfortunate circumstance. And so what you're doing is actually you're melting the walls. You're actually kind of melting the walls with possibly kind of the implicit bias we all have when we hear convicted felon. We probably all, to some degree, shudder. That that's them, this is us. But what you're doing is you're helping melt those walls. You're literally actually helping provide proximity to these, caring, loving individuals by and large, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, there is that small, that whatever that's percentage of, which is, I mean, they do intend malice and harm, and certainly there's that aspect of the, convicted felons. And I want to.
Absolutely.
But I would say I'm guessing a larger majority are represented by Taylor. They're in the system. We're in a system actually with mass incarcerations. I mean, I think there's actually a whole societal thing. The mass incarceration is driven by the war on drugs. And that is a absolute travesty. I just want to say that's an absolute travesty. There's this mass incarceration, and I think it's actually quite political because it overlaps with, if you look at 13th, it's a Netflix series. Look at 13th, and you'll see how this tracks into Black oppression, because ultimately, when Black population got the vote, you'll see there's a whole rise of, well, let's find a way to actually strip them of the vote so they get the vote, they're emancipated, and there's an understanding, well, if we incarcerate them, they lose their rights to vote. So it's just, when I say I'm laughing, it's not a laughing Really, it's not a laughing matter. I'm actually outraged about that. I watched that movie, and it is an outrage. And so we need, and part of what I think you're doing over here is you're not only are you humanizing, restoring people's dignity. So because we can feel compassion for them in your interviews, and you're saying, by the grace of God, you're giving us proximity, re-engaging, and actually you're providing healing for Taylor and individuals like Taylor to actually re-enter life with their dignity restored, because they have met a lawyer, a lawyer with compassion. They've met a lawyer with compassion that wants to restore their dignity. I mean, I don't know if you're in rarefied air. I don't know how many lawyers in the percentage of lawyers are doing the kind of work that you're doing with the sensibility you're doing it. But in that sense, there's another area, because we spoke about this idea that there are multiple levels. There's an individual level, there's a community level, and there's a societal level, right?
Yes.
Purpose for this journey. And so in the personal level, it's about restoring dignity for the individual, and you're loving on people that have been marginalized. So there's a personal dimension to this. But at a societal level, I think you actually, when you're talking about elevating society, you're pointing out I'm thinking we've actually moved into a new administration. I think and there's a theme, there's a call for criminal justice reform. That's the work that you're doing as well in his interviews. It needs, the system that we have needs criminal justice reform, because if you look at the incarcerations, even through the Clinton and Obama years, even through the Democratic, mass incarcerations kept going up and up and up. So we have to take a close look at, it's not just systemic racism. Well, it's part of systemic racism. There's something happening at a system-wide level where we are mass incarcerating people beyond what's healthy for society, So we need to come back to criminal justice reform to reverse that trend. There are so many people sitting incarcerated right now that are like Taylor. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I work primarily with drug offenders and nonviolent offenders. And so absolutely, I want to acknowledge that there is a segment of criminals that, like you said, act in intention and malice. There is, through the war on drugs, an unbelievable number of people who are incarcerated and reincarcerated because of drug offenses for inordinately long and beyond unfair sentence lengths. And ultimately, in a society where people of color were denied the right to vote, then were given the right to vote, and we thought we had made progress, this war on drugs and this mass incarceration is a means of disenfranchising these people of their dignity, their right to vote and contribute to society. And it is just so important that we work in our communities and society as a whole and recognize that there is so much to be had for our country, and we will be better for focusing on rehabilitation and reintegration.
So let us call this mass incarceration because of the war on drugs what it is. It's systemic racism. It's systemic oppression. It's disenfranchisement. And this needs to be changed. And actually, I hope, again, I'm coming back to President Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Please listen to this video and know that we're standing with you in solidarity in this desire to actually support your efforts, in criminal justice reform. And it's not lost on me, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, that you're a lawyer as well in the system. So you understand the system better than anybody else. And so we want to align with you. And I don't know how to get, right now, I don't know how this, this message is going to get, because I put this in a lot of videos. I did on day 15, I did an incredible talk. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Ed, but
no.
Please go back and listen to, I'm in conversation with Dr. Yvette Miller. Dr. Yvette Miller is the medical executive officer of the Red Cross. And we are talking, we're in raw conversations about healing systemic racism. Go back and look at that. And so that needs to be seen by millions of people. This piece over here needs to be seen by a million of people. And if there's anybody out there in the universe that can get this video, those two videos, to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, please forward these videos on, because in all due respect, I want you to see President-elect Joe Biden, who there's another dimension to this, who I know, your son died of the same cancer that I have right now. I believe that I've been given this diagnosis. I mean, it's so, it's the what the cosmic script is calling for. I want to do this work in alignment. We're an army of people over here, growing army of people. This is why I want this channel to be, the subscriber base to go viral. So everybody who's inspired by what Ed and I are talking about right now, if you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button below this video and send it to everybody else that you want to hear this message. And you want to be part of a movement that is standing for racial justice and ending this mass incarceration, the systemic oppression of mass incarceration. Please subscribe and send it to everybody else. And actually, we need to actually build a coalition of movements, individuals and movements coming all together to work with leadership like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to do this work of healing the soul of the nation. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're standing by ready. We're standing by ready to do this work with you. No one person can do, no one organization, no one government organization can do it alone. Going back to I'm even thinking about JFK. JFK says, what was the famous line? Ask not what the country can do for you, but what we can do for our country.
Absolutely.
This is what we want to do for our country. We're ready and willing. We are ready and willing to rally. We are ready and willing to rally to be part of the healing of the soul of our nation. So please, and I implore you, anybody that can get this video and this channel to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, please help us in doing so. And in the meantime, please subscribe and actually make this as viral as we can, because that's what's going to create this. This is going to be a part of a coalition of healing, that we have a shot with a sufficient enough coalition, with my ability to shine a light on all of these individuals and organizations that are doing this work of healing, growth, and elevation, and elevating individuals, families, both at home and at work, communities, and then society, elevating all aspects in large causes, like how do we actually heal from COVID? How do we heal systemic racism? How do we heal our political, deep political polarization right now? How do we heal that? So this is a work that needs to be done by a collective. It can't be done by the government alone. And we're ready to actually stand with you, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And God bless you for opening a lane of possibility where there's healing the soul of the nation. and by extension, the soul of the world, can occur.
Agreed.
Yeah, amen. Well, Ed, I'm mindful that brings us actually to the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So I want to invite some closing words, whatever you feel moved to share, whatever you feel moved to share.
I wanted to share something that came up in watching your son, Dylan, and watching some of the videos. And it's actually something I wrote back in 2014, and it just struck me again this morning because understandably there has been fear and anxiety through this process. And I was going back and I came across the concept of fear of the Lord. And it's this Old Testament expression that means reverential trust. And to revere God is to regard him with fear mingled with respect and affection. And I was reading through the book of Ecclesiastes, and in that book, Solomon reasons about life, and he begins Ecclesiastes by stating, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And by vanity, Solomon means that which is empty without permanent value, and which leads to frustration. And he's telling us that earthly things are empty and meaningless, and the pursuit of them is fruitless. But this emptiness is the final result of a life apart from God. And I believe that God is however we conceive or feel of God's presence in our life at all moments. And so what I wanted to share is that, oftentimes we talk about fear, or we think about it as being scared. And if you take the word scared, being scared for Christians is having Christ as an afterthought, SCARED. But if you change the A and you live your life modeled after Christ, who encouraged us to love God and love others, then scared becomes sacred. And I really think that that is so deeply important, that we recognize what is sacred in our lives. Life itself is immensely sacred, and that we love fully and deeply, and that we live every moment as passionately and fully as we possibly can.
Thank you for invoking the sacred in the close. And I think that's the appropriate place to close. You've actually invoked the sacred that is flowing through all of us. I could not have think of a more powerful close than what you've just offered. And that is the essence of all of this work that we're doing collectively. So Ed, I love you, my brother. I so love you. I so love you. I so love you. And I feel this incredible privilege. I cannot tell you how privileged I feel to have walked beside you on this coaching journey. I think I've learned as much on the journey as I may have inspired in your growth. So it's been a very rich journey. I'm so inspired by you, Ed. I'm so inspired by you. And I'm just looking forward to kind of like how this unfolding journey continues to, where we get to continue serving each other. And then from that inspiration, I trust we will be in service, of serving even more expansively with God's grace in the world.
Absolutely. And I just love you deeply, and am so grateful and thankful for the blessing that you are in my life.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ed. Yes.
Thanks. Bye.